Hello, everyone. When I was preparing today's speech for the Colorado Water Congress, I saw the agenda originally had this year's convention ending with the Wayne Aspinall Leader of the Year Award. I understand that ceremony will now take place later this year. When it happens, last year's recipient, my friend Russ George, will present this year's award to the person exemplifying, and I quote, "the courage, dedication, knowledge, and leadership qualities shown by Wayne Aspinall in the development, protection, and preservation of Colorado water." That's a high bar, and it's worth pausing on what it actually means. The district Wayne Aspinall represented, which I now represent, is huge. Colorado's 3rd district covers nearly 50,000 square miles, virtually half of the state's landmass. Within this single district, you could fit the states of Rhode Island, Delaware, Connecticut, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts, with still some space left over. Now, representing that big district means I spend a lot of time on airplanes and a lot of time in cars. In all this traveling, I've made a conscious effort to read more books. Last year, one of my staff members let me borrow a biography called Wayne Aspinall in the Shaping of the American West. It's a remarkable book, not just because of who Aspinall was, but because what his career teaches about politics in the West. Wayne Aspinall's congressional career, writes the book's author, Steve Schulte, is a magnificent study in Western American political power, how to achieve it, how to hold it, and ultimately how to lose it. And there are lessons in this book, not just for me as Aspinall's successor, but for all of us who care about how water decisions actually get made in the West. For example, Aspinall understood that success often requires absorbing criticism early in order to build durable outcomes later. He once said he would rather be, and I quote, "an individual's target at the beginning of the game and his darling at the end, rather than vice versa." For Aspinall, it was about establishing principles first and then earning agreement over time. He also understood that power in Congress is built through trust, and that trust starts by showing up with the basics. This is a lesson I take seriously. I learned from this book that when Aspinall won his first congressional race in 1948, one of his sharpest critiques of the incumbent Republican that he was challenging wasn't an ideological critique. It was that his incumbent had a reputation for neglecting routine constituent work. Aspinall chose a different approach. The book mentioned that constituent mail never lingered long in Aspinall's office. It was usually answered the day it arrived. How about that, Lauren and Gabe? That's impressive, answering your constituents' mail in one day. Now, in fairness, Aspinall never had to deal with email and social media and text messages. So that's something that we have as members of Congress now that Congressman Aspinall didn't have to deal with. Aspinall was strategically patient, sometimes maddeningly so. As chairman of the House Committee on the Interior, what is now Natural Resources, he was a remarkably effective legislator. He left his imprint on almost every significant piece of legislation affecting the American West during that era. He understood that process itself can be a source of power. His critics would sometimes accuse his committee hearings of being a search for time rather than a search for information. But Aspinall understood something fundamental about Congress. Time sometimes is power. By controlling the process, he could block, reshape, or ultimately defeat initiatives that threaten Colorado and the West. That was not obstruction, that was strategy. The battles over the Colorado River Storage Project in the 1950s taught Aspinall a lasting lesson about influence. He came to understand that the upper Colorado River Basin was vastly outnumbered in the House, and that fact shaped everything that followed. As the book about him put it, the upper Colorado Basin lacked political strength. Future reclamation projects would need to be carefully constructed with supporting alliances in mind. And that leads directly to a central truth that's probably obvious to everyone in this room, but was not to me. Water policy in the West is not primarily a technical challenge, it's a political one. And if you don't engage the politics honestly, the facts alone will not save you. When I first came to Congress, I assumed that water debates would turn on hydrology, modeling, and engineering. Those things certainly do matter. You all know them better than I or any of us here on the stage ever will. But what I learned from reading Aspinall's biography and what I see reflected every day in Congress is that what decides outcomes in Washington is something else entirely. Oftentimes it's unity, timing, and persistence. And whether the West shows up speaking with one voice or not. Wayne Aspinall understood that reality. He didn't win because he was the most virtuous person in the room or because his projects were universally loved. He won because he understood power. He built coalitions. He held them together, and he defended them relentlessly. He also understood that protecting the West required more than good arguments and coalitions. It required institutional presence. He served as chairman of the Interior Committee for more than a decade, not because he sought the spotlight, but because he believed the West needed someone at the table who understood its interests and who was willing to defend them over time. Colorado, and the Upper Basin more broadly, has never had the luxury of large numbers of members of Congress. When we succeed, it's because we've had members in the right places, at the right times, willing to do the unglamorous work of committee leadership and coalition building. Aspinall understood that institutional leverage, and he understood that exercised patiently, it could offset numerical weakness. That is the lesson that I'm taking to heart. And it's a perspective that shapes how I approach my service in Congress, including on water issues. I think a lot about where Colorado needs representation, not just in speeches, but in rooms where decisions actually get made. I believe in Congress, albeit flawed. I believe in it as an institution. And I believe the West is best served when we engage seriously, consistently, and for the long term. The Frying Pan, Arkansas project is an example of how Aspinall understood the projects of water. At the time, the project was deeply controversial. Communities in Pitkin County and the Roaring Fork Valley in his own district were seriously worried about diversions, fisheries, and recreation. Those concerns were sincere and strongly felt. They were so strongly felt that, in fact, Pitkin County residents organized a letter writing campaign in support of John Saylor from Pennsylvania, who is the highest ranking Republican on the Interior Committee, because they believed a Republican congressman from Pennsylvania was their best hope of stopping a Colorado water project. That tells you two things. First, water decisions have always mattered deeply to the communities affected by them. This isn't new. But second, and this was the lesson that Aspinall took from it, it shows the political environment he was operating in. He was advocating for a project that was unpopular in a part of his own district, faced organized opposition, and dealing with national scrutiny all at the same time. Now, at that time, of course, there was still water available in what is now an over-appropriated Colorado River basin. Yet Aspinall stayed engaged. He worked the process, he listened, he built coalitions, he demanded compensatory storage, and he kept pushing, not because it was easy, but because he believed the long-term benefits for southern and eastern Colorado justified that effort. Now today, the Frying Pan, Arkansas project is a cornerstone of water supply for communities, agriculture, and industry across the Arkansas Valley and the Front Range. It's a reminder that many of the projects we now take for granted were once politically risky and far from assured. That history shapes how I think about water policy today. One modern example and my top water priority in Congress, we were asked to talk about our top water priority in Congress. My top water priority in Congress is unfreezing $40 million in federal funding for the Shoshone water rights on the Colorado River. These senior rights, you can tell where the Western Coloradans are. Actually, all of us should be in favor of this because it helps us for reasons I can get into. These senior rights play a critical role in maintaining flows through Glenwood Canyon in Western Colorado, supporting agriculture, recreation, local economies, our energy economy, and overall system stability during a time of changing hydrology that is putting extreme pressures on the Colorado River Basin system. The Department of the Interior's funding on B2E funding has put acquisition of those in-stream flow rights at risk and raises serious concerns for communities across the Western Slope. I've been pressing hard to deliver those funds with the White House, directly with senior leadership at the Department of the Interior, including Secretary Burgum, and with House leadership. That work continues. Without getting into too many of the details, that process has also shown me that even in water policy, broader political dynamics can intrude. But that only reinforces why finishing this work matters, because stability should not hinge on short-term politics. Now, another example of politics of water comes with what Representative Boebert had to say with the Arkansas Valley Conduit. For decades, communities in the Lower Arkansas Valley have waited for reliable access to clean drinking water. When this Congress finally passed a bill unanimously to make it easier for those communities to repay the federal government, it reflected the broad bipartisan support that that project had gained. The president's veto of that bill was deeply disappointing. I worked closely with my colleague, Representative Boebert, to try and override that veto. We spent days doing what most people never see, trying to persuade our colleagues and counting votes one conversation at a time. We built a serious bipartisan coalition, including support from senior members across multiple committees in the House of Representatives. Now, in the end, that override effort fell short. But I learned a lot in this process. It highlighted for me that in Congress, votes do not just turn on the merits. They turn on relationships, risk, and each individual legislator's tolerance for exercising political courage in a specific set of circumstances. But my work is not going to stop there. I learned from Aspinall that policy doesn't succeed because everyone agrees at the outset. It succeeds because people stay engaged when agreement breaks down. And water teaches us something about persistence also. When water meets an obstacle, it doesn't give up. It finds a way around it, or it wears that obstacle down. In that respect, and on the issues that matter to us in Colorado, I plan to be like water. We'll keep pushing on Shoshone, the Arkansas Valley Conduit, on storage projects, and on the challenges we face with the Bureau of Reclamation's operating guidelines. By the way, as an aside, I have serious concerns about the EIS we recently saw issued and some of the assumptions that are underlining those alternatives. They seem to echo some of the mistakes about hydrology that underpin the Colorado River Compact in 1922 and the 2007 operating guidelines as well. As we look ahead, the challenges facing our water systems are only getting harder. Drought pressure, aging infrastructure, population growth, climate variability, and increasing competition for limited supplies are not theoretical risks. They are realities that we are already living with. That's why representation matters. Wayne Aspinall understood that strong water policy requires deep respect for Western water law, for agriculture and rural communities, and for the fact that solutions developed in Washington don't translate neatly into the conditions of the West. He also understood that the West only protects its interests when it shows up unified, disciplined, and willing to stay engaged over the long haul. That's the approach I'm committed to in Congress, and I hope you are as well. I need your help, particularly as a freshman member of Congress halfway through his first term. I need the advice of the people in this room. I need your expertise. I need your guidance. And I commit to you that I will work to support the good work that you're doing to help secure federal resources, remove unnecessary barriers, and make sure that Colorado's voice is heard clearly and credibly when national water decisions are being made. And I also remain committed to working across party lines. Durable water policy doesn't come from narrow victories. It comes from broad coalitions that can hold when conditions change. If we're serious about honoring Wayne Aspinall today, about honoring the award that bears his name, then we should be honest about what leadership in this moment requires. It requires patience, unity, and a willingness to exercise institutional power on behalf of the West. And Wayne Aspinall was actually not the first Western Slope member of Congress to understand that. Decades earlier, Edward Taylor, as in the Taylor Grazing Act, Edward Taylor, another Western Colorado giant in Congress, put it even more starkly. Writing in 1935, he said, and I quote, "The waters of the Colorado River are worth more than 1,000 times more to the Colorado River Basin than all its minerals and everything else. It's the only great river in the world entirely within an arid region and intrinsically the most valuable stream on the planet." That understanding, and that water is the West's most precious asset, and that protecting it requires courage, discipline, and institutional leadership, has been passed down before. And it is our responsibility to carry it forward now. Thank you, Colorado Water Congress. It's an honor to be with you.